I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I wasn't always the woman who walked into Prescott Trading Company with a dead man's ring in her palm. I was somebody before that February morning. I was Adelaide Moore, Yt of Daniel Moore, keeper of a little homestead with a garden that grew tomatoes so red they'd make you weep. I had flour in my cupboard and wood stacked to the rafters and a man who kissed my forehead every morning like it was Sunday prayer. But Daniel had been in the ground 3 months by then. And well, the flour was gone. The wood was gone. The tomatoes were a memory buried under frost. I walked through town that morning with my spine straight as a fence post. Because listen, that was all I had left. My posture, my pride, the way I held my chin like the wind couldn't touch me, even when it was cutting through my coat like a knife through butter. I could hear them, you know, the whispers. Mrs. Calloway leaning toward Mrs. Denton outside the milliner's shop, their breath making little clouds in the cold air. The Moore widow won't last till spring. I didn't turn my head, didn't give them the satisfaction, but I heard every word, and each one landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ring sat in my pocket, warm from my body heat. Daniel's ring well, mine, I suppose. The one he'd slid onto my finger on a summer afternoon when the world was green and possible, and he'd looked at me with those steady brown eyes and said, "Adelaide, I'm going to spend the rest of my life deserving you." He'd meant it too. Every single day until the fever took him. He'd meant it. I pushed open the door of Prescott Trading Company, and the smell hit me first. Leather and coffee beans and cinnamon sticks in a jar by the register. Warmth, Lord, the warmth. My cabin hadn't been truly warm in weeks. I'd been burning furniture, the chair with the wobbly leg, then the footstool Daniel carved our first winter, each piece fed to the stove like I was feeding it pieces of my old life just to survive another night. The counter was long and dark and polished. I set my hands on it, both hands, flat because they were trembling, and I needed them to stop. "How much for the gold?" I said. My voice held, barely, like a fence wire stretched too tight. One more gust and it'd snap clean. The shopkeeper, young fella, nervous eyes, looked at the ring I'd placed between us, looked at me, looked toward the back office like he was hoping someone else would handle this particular piece of misery. Let me get Mr. Prescott. Ma'am." Heavy boots on wood floor. Coming closer, I picked up the ring and held it tight in my fist. Whatever happened next, I would not cry in this store. I would not. The neighbor's cat, old Ginger, the only living thing I'd managed to feed this week, because someone in that cabin ought to eat. She looked at me this morning with those lamp gold eyes like she knew, like she understood I was down to my last 3 days of flour and my last shred of dignity. The boots stopped. I looked up, and that was the moment everything changed. Though I didn't know it yet, I was just a woman with a ring in her trembling hand, asking the price of gold in a store that smelled like everything she'd lost. Garrett Prescott was not what I expected. I mean, I'd heard of him, everyone in Cedar Bluff had. Millionaire cattleman, owned half the valley, built the trading company as I suppose as a service to the town, more than a business necessity. A man like that, you picture someone tall and sharp-eyed and impatient. Someone who looks at a starving widow and sees a problem to be solved or a nuisance to be managed. He was tall, I'll give him that, broad-shouldered, with hands that didn't match his money-rough hands, working hands, the kind that told you he hadn't always sat behind a desk. His eyes were gray, steady, And when they landed on me, I braced myself. Here it comes, I thought. The pity, that awful softening around the mouth that says you poor dear without speaking a word. Or worse, the quick flick of the eyes. The assessment, what's she worth? What can I get? I'd learned to read both since Daniel died, but Garrett Prescott did neither. He looked at the ring in my palm, then he looked at me, really looked. Not through me, not past me at me, like he was reading something written in a language most folks couldn't be bothered to learn. I don't buy wedding rings, ma'am. My stomach dropped. Just fell right through the floor. Because that ring was the last thing. And if he wouldn't buy it, then I was. However, he said, and his voice was low, unhurried, like a man who'd learned that Russian words was the same as wasting them. I need someone to run this store. Previous manager left for California 3 weeks ago. I've been filling in, but I got cattle operations that need my attention. He paused, studied me again. Job's yours if you want it. Fair wages. Start Monday. The fury came first, hot and fast, rising up my throat. Because I knew what this was. I knew. This was a rich man's charity wrapped in pretty paper. And I'd sooner starve than I don't need charity. My chin came up. My voice was level. Garrett didn't flinch. Didn't do that thing men do where they soften their voice like they're talking to a spooked horse. This ain't charity, ma'am, he said. It's the best business decision I'll make this year. I searched his face, turned it over in my mind like I'd turn a coin, looking for the false edge, the trick, found nothing but, honestly, nothing but a man who meant what he said. Trial week, I said. Fair wages, and the ring stays mine. Yes, ma'am. I walked home that afternoon with the ring still on my finger and a job starting Monday. The cabin was still cold. The cupboard was still bare. But something had shifted in my chest, something I couldn't name, like the first crack in river ice before spring. You hear it, and you don't know yet if it means the thaw is coming or if you're about to fall through. I fed Ginger the last of the milk and sat in the dark and thought, well, Adelaide, either this is the stupidest thing you've done since marrying a dreamer with 40 acres and a prayer, or it's the smartest. I threw myself into that store like a woman fighting a fire, which, I suppose, I was, because if I stopped moving, if I stood still long enough for the silence to settle, the grief would catch me. And I could not afford to be caught. Not when being useful was the only thing standing between me and the street. First thing Monday, I memorized the stock, every barrel of flour, every tin of sardines, every bolt of calico. By Wednesday, I'd reorganize the shelves by frequency of purchase staples at eye level. Luxuries where you had to reach. By Friday, I knew every regular by name and order, but it was the Perkins order that proved what I could do. Old Mr. Perkins came in Thursday morning with a list his wife had written: flour, lard, salt pork, coffee, and lamp oil. I gathered each item, set them on the counter, and was wrapping the flour when I noticed his hands, swollen at the knuckles, red. The left one wouldn't close all the way. Mr. Perkins, I said carefully, I notice we've got a new shipment of liniment in. I could add a tin to your order. Same price as the Denver brand, but better quality. Mrs. Perkins might find it useful around the house. His face changed. Just a flicker surprise, then something softer. I reckon that'd be fine. Mrs. Moore, much obliged. He didn't have to say the liniment was for him. I didn't have to ask. Some things a good storekeeper knows without being told. That's when I saw Henderson, for the first time, Roy Henderson, leaning against the pickle barrel, watching me. He'd wanted this position. I knew that from the way the young shopkeeper had whispered it to me my first morning. Mr. Henderson's been asking after the job since January. Henderson had small, close-set eyes and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to do anything but calculate. He watched me help Mr. Perkins, and his jaw tightened. Then he walked out without buying a thing. I filed that away. The way you file away a cloud on the horizon, maybe rain, maybe nothing, but worth remembering. Garrett came and went through the week. He didn't hover, didn't check my work. He carried his own freight-hefted 50-pound grain sacks, mended the back step himself with hammer and nails instead of sending for someone. Wealthy man with calloused palms. I noticed, and I was irritated that I noticed. The well out back was frozen solid. I hauled water from the creek a quarter mile away, 2 buckets at a time, arms burning, didn't ask for help, wouldn't. The empty bucket by the back door sat there each morning hollow, useless, a mirror showing me something I didn't want to see. Come Friday evening, I caught my reflection in the store window at closing time, thinner than I remembered, but standing, upright, behind a counter that smelled like cedar and something I was afraid to call possibility. I didn't mean to care about these people. The job was stock and sales and keeping the ledger straight. Nobody said anything about learning that Mrs. Harlan's arthritis worsened in the damp, or that Tom Birch bought tobacco he couldn't afford because it was the one pleasure left after his wife passed, or that the Dawson girl Lily, her name was Lily, touched those blue hair ribbons each visit like they were made of silk and starlight. But I noticed that was my curse, and as it turned out, my gift. It was Ellen Marsh who broke something open in me. Young mother, barely 20, husband working the railroad months at a time. She came in on a Tuesday with her little boy on her hip, Thomas, 2 years old, cheeks flushed with fever, eyes glassy. She set 3 eggs on the counter. "What'll these get me toward children's tonic?" she asked, and her voice was so careful, so controlled, that I recognized it immediately. That was my voice, 3 months ago, at this very counter. I wrapped the tonic in 2 tins of broth and added them to my own tab. No fuss. "You get that boy well. Mrs. Marsh." She looked at me with those tired, terrified eyes and whispered, "Much obliged, Mrs. Moore." Truly, Martha Gentry saw the whole thing, didn't say a word, just caught my eye over the fabric bolts, and gave me a nod so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But I was, and that nod, well, it felt like being recognized, not as a widow, not as a charity case, as a woman who understood what it cost to need help and what it meant to give it quiet. Evenings were the dangerous part. That's when Garrett would come by after his ranch work, dusty and tired, to review the books, but the reviewing turned into talking. "Adelaide, what do you think? Should we carry more wool before autumn orders come in?" I looked up from the ledger. "I think we should order direct from the Cheyenne mill instead of going through Denver. Cut the middleman, save near 30% on grain costs, and we could pass half that savings to families who need it." He was quiet a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll send the letter tomorrow." No argument. No, well. Let me think about it. Just trust. Like my judgment was a thing that had weight, that deserved to land. Summer was coming. The air was warmer, but dry, so dry. I started keeping a rain tally, on the back of a brown envelope, little pencil marks for each dry day, like a prayer I wouldn't admit to prayin'. One afternoon, the Perkins child, little Annie, pressed her nose flat against the candy jar, eyes wide as silver dollars. My mouth pulled at one corner. The muscles felt stiff from disuse, unfamiliar, like trying to open a door that's been stuck shut all winter. Not quite a smile, but the hinge was loosening. The drought came, the way grief comes slow at first. Then all at once, by mid-July, the town well had failed, dropped to mud, then dust, then nothing. Cattle bawling in the fields, dust in your teeth, your hair, the creases of your hands, no matter how many times you wipe them, which wasn't often anymore. I organized the rationing. I don't know when that became my job, but it did. I had the ledger. I had the numbers. I knew who had how many mouths to feed and how far each bucket needed to stretch. Fair shares, no exceptions. Even Garrett's ranch hands waited their turn. The town leaned on me, and I held. But that night, after the store was closed and the schedule was posted, and the last customer had taken their ration, with tired, grateful eyes, I sat alone behind the counter in the dark. The empty bucket was by the back door. I could see its outline in the moonlight, round and hollow and useless. I took the ring from my finger, held it up to the thin silver light. And I broke. Not the dignified kind of crying I'd allowed myself at the funeral. That careful, controlled release, like opening a valve just enough to keep the boiler from exploding. No, this was the ugly kind. The shaken, gasping, forehead on the counter kind. The kind where your whole body joins in, like every bone has been waiting for permission. I cried for Daniel, for his warm hands and his steady voice, for that one evening, Lord. I can still see it when I'd burned the cornbread, and he sat at the table and ate every last crumb and said, "Best batch yet, Addie," with that crooked grin. And I'd thrown the dish towel at him, and we'd laughed until my ribs ached. I cried for that laughter, for the children we'd planned, too. We'd said, a boy and a girl, for the growing old together, for the whole beautiful life that was buried alongside him. I didn't hear Garrett come in. When I looked up, face ruined, pride in absolute shambles, he was sitting on the other side of the counter, quiet, hands folded on the wood between us. He didn't speak, didn't reach for me, didn't offer a handkerchief or a platitude or any of those useless things people hand you when your world is falling apart. He just stayed. Two people on opposite sides of a counter with moonlight between them and nothing to say, because some griefs are too big for words, and the only mercy is someone willing to sit inside the dark with you. After a while, I don't know how long, time had gone soft. He stood, nodded once, left quietly. I locked the store, walked past the empty bucket, didn't curse it this time, just let it be what it was. Henderson started the rumors on a Monday. I should have seen it coming. That look he'd given me back in my first week, leaning against the pickle barrel, jaw tight, eyes measuring that wasn't curiosity. That was a man drawing up plans. I'd filed the cloud away and then forgot to watch the horizon. The whispers were creative. I'll give him that. First it was skimming, Mrs. Moore's been helping herself to the till. You know, ain't no widow that poor gets that comfortable that fast without sticky fingers. Then it got uglier. Why do you think Prescott hired her? And it ain't for her bookkeeping. I'll tell you that much. Henderson said it himself to a group outside the barber shop, loud enough that half the street could hear. I ain't saying nothing against the lady, he said. in that particular voice men use when they are absolutely saying something against the lady. I'm just saying, it don't add up. A man don't hand his business to a stranger, lest there's something in it for him. Martha Gentry told me, sweet, worried Martha, leaning over the counter, I don't believe a word. Mrs. Moore, but folks are talking. My hands kept wrapping Mrs. Harlan's soap. My face didn't change. Thank you, Martha, I said. I appreciate you telling me. She left. I finished the wrapping, set the soap down gentle, then I gripped the counter edge so hard my knuckles turned white. Because this was the thing I knew best. The world reducing a woman to a story. Competence didn't matter. Character didn't matter. All that mattered was what tale other people decided to write about you. I pulled every ledger, opened them on the counter, and went through each entry. Though I already knew every number was clean, every penny singing in its proper column. That evening, I sat down and took out a piece of paper. Dear Mr. Prescott, I hereby resign my position. The pen stopped. I looked at the ledger still open beside me. The names, Ellen Marsh, Mrs. Harlan, Lily Dawson, Tom Birch, Annie Perkins, with her nose on the candy jar. These weren't his customers anymore. They were mine. I'd built something with those names, earned each one with fair credit and quiet kindnesses that never made it into any ledger but mattered more than any number I'd ever written. I folded the letter in half, didn't finish it, set it in my nightstand drawer at home. Beneath the ring I'd started leaving there most nights. 2 relics of surrender, side by side. I couldn't sleep. The moonlight came through the cabin window and fell across the nightstand, and I lay there staring at the drawer where the ring sat next to the half-written letter, and I thought about all the ways a woman can disappear. You can disappear into a grave, like Daniel did, quick, final, or you can disappear slow into widowhood, into other people's stories, into the careful, controlled version of yourself that keeps you safe but keeps you small. I got up, opened the drawer, held the ring one more time. It was warm from sitting near me all those weeks. Daniel's ring, the thing I'd carried into Prescott's store that February morning as proof I was once worth loving. I'd been holding on to it like a drowning woman grips a rope, desperate, certain that letting go meant sinking. But tonight, it felt different. Heavier, not like love, like fear. Stay, and I risked the gossip, the vulnerability, the awful, breathtaking possibility that I might care about this town, this store, this man who sat in the dark with me and asked nothing, and then lose it all again, leave, and I kept the ring in the hollow safety of a woman who never let herself want anything ever again. I thought about Daniel, not the dying. I was so tired of the dying. I thought about the living, his laugh, big and sudden, like it surprised even him. The burned cornbread he'd eaten every crumb of, the way he'd watch me balance the household ledger and shake his head and say, Adelaide, you could run this whole territory if they'd let you. He'd meant that too, same as the wedding vow, same as every word he ever said to me. He would not want this ring to be a chain. I placed it in the drawer, gently, like laying a sleeping child down. Not goodbye, never goodbye, but permission. The click of the drawer was so soft, such a small sound for such a large thing. I tore the resignation letter. Once, then again, until the pieces were too small to hold any words at all. Then I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands empty and my heart terrified, trembling, alive beaten harder than it had in months. The birds started before the light came. They always do. The song comes first, then the morning follows. I arrived at the store before sunup. There was a stillness in me that was new, not the brittle kind, not the controlled kind, held together with wire and willpower. Something deeper, like the surface of a lake after the wind dies, and you can see clear to the bottom. I opened every ledger on the counter, lined them up, spines cracked, pages spread, every transaction from the day I started. Then I unlocked the front door and waited. Henderson came mid-morning, brought 2 men with him, Horace Finch from the bank and Samuel Peck from the livery, witnesses, an audience for what he figured would be my unraveling. He walked in with that sour smile and said, loud enough for the 3 customers already browsing to hear, "Mrs. Moore, there's been concerns raised about this establishment. Financial concerns. I reckon it's time we had us a look at them books." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "The books are right there, Mr. Henderson. Every ledger, every page, every entry since February. You're welcome to inspect them." He hadn't expected that. The flicker behind his eyes, the plan adjusting, the ground shifting under his feet. "Furthermore," I said, "since you seem so interested in my accounts, let me save you the trouble." I recited them, from memory, every significant transaction from the past 6 months' names, dates, amounts, Mrs. Harlan's arthritis medicine, monthly, Tom Birch's tobacco, weekly, Lily Dawson's blue ribbons, first Saturday of each month, Ellen Marsh's credit account, paid in full last Thursday, the Perkins family liniment, Mr. Perkins' swollen hands improving each week, lumber orders, flour shipments, the Cheyenne Mill arrangement saving every family in Cedar Bluff money they desperately needed. The store had gone quiet. Martha stood by the fabric bolts, hand over her heart. Ellen had come in during my recitation and was standing by the door with Thomas on her hip. "I came here with nothing but a ring and my pride," I said, looking straight at Henderson. Not with anger. I was past anger, past fear. This was something else entirely, the calm of a woman standing on ground she built herself. "I'll keep both, thank you." Henderson opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Finch, who was running his banker's finger down my ledger columns with raised eyebrows and a slow, appreciative nod, looked at Peck, who wouldn't meet his eyes, looked at the room full of people who were not looking at him at all. He left without a word. The bell above the door rang after him like a period at the end of a sentence. The store exhaled. Martha hugged me right there between the fabric bolts and the pickle barrel. Ellen said, "Land sakes, Mrs. Moore, I ain't ever seen the like," and her voice cracked on the words. After closing, I was sweeping behind the counter when my broom caught on something. Wedged between the baseboard and the floor, a brooch, tarnished silver, delicate filigree, a tiny sapphire at the center no bigger than a teardrop. I knew it was his grandmother's. He'd mentioned it once. Months ago, the only jewelry his mother's mother brought west. He'd thought it lost forever. I sat down right there on the floor, with the broom across my knees, and polished that brooch with the hem of my apron, slowly. The way you handle something that belongs to someone who matters to you. And I let that thought sit there without flinching from it. I wrapped it in clean muslin, wrote a note in my best hand, found this treasure, figured it belonged to someone who treasures people. My hands were steady. I noticed this, left the brooch on his desk, walked home in the warm evening air. The empty bucket by the back door caught the last light. And for the first time, it didn't look like an accusation. It looked like it was waiting for something, like it knew what was coming. The rain came on a Thursday. I was on the store porch, tallying receipts in my head habit by now, numbers flowing through my mind like water over smooth stones when the first drop hit the railing. Then another, then the sky opened up like it had been holding its breath all summer, and finally let go. The dust drank it. You could almost hear the earth sigh this deep, grateful sound, like a woman setting down a burden she's carried so long she forgot what her shoulders felt like without it. I set down my pencil and watched. Rain darkened the street from gold to brown, filled the wagon ruts, drummed on the livery's tin roof. Across the way, the Perkins children ran out barefoot, Annie spinning with her arms wide and her face turned up. Mrs. Calloway came to her door and stood there with her eyes closed, and I could see her lips moving, but I don't think she was talking to anyone on this earth. And I thought for the first time I don't know how long I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about what I'd built. A store that ran true, a town that trusted me, credit given and repaid, and given again this quiet, invisible web of faith I'd woven one name at a time. Ellen's boy was healthy. Lily had her ribbons. Mr. Perkins could close his hand again. The Cheyenne arrangement was saving every family in Cedar Bluff money they needed for winter. I'd done that. Me, Adelaide Moore, not the widow, not the charity case, not the woman who once stood at this counter with a ring in her trembling hand. Just me. Garrett found me at evening. The rain had softened to a steady whisper, and I was still on the porch, still marveling at the way water makes everything look new. He came up the steps quietly, stood beside me not too close, not too far. That was his way, always giving me room to breathe, room to choose. He had the brooch in his hand. My note in his pocket, I could see the edge of the muslin peeking out. For a long moment, we just stood there, two people watching the rain fill the cracks in the earth, listening to the town come alive laughter and the creak of doors opening, and somewhere, far off, a child's voice calling, "Come, look, come, look." "Adelaide," he said. In the way he said my name, it wasn't like Daniel used to say it. Daniel said it like a hymn. Garrett said it like a fact, something solid and real and worth saying out loud. I found the brooch and the note. He turned it in his fingers, tarnished silver catching the last of the light. "My grandmother would have liked you. She was like you, came west with nothing, built something from the ground up." I listened to the rain. "Keep your ring, Adelaide. It's yours. Always will be." He paused, looked out at the wet street, the filled puddles, the earth drinking deep. "But I'd be honored if, someday, you'd consider wearing a new one." No pressure, no urgency. A door opened, not a hand pulling me through. I didn't answer right away. I let the rain fall, let the silence stretch out between us, not empty silence, not awkward silence, but the kind that has room in it. Room for a woman to feel the wood railing under her palms, cool and wet and solid. Room to hear her own heartbeat and know it was steady. Room to look at a man and see not rescue, not salvation, not a replacement for what was lost, but a companion for what came next. I looked at the bucket, that empty, hollowed out, accusing bucket that had sat by the back door since winter. It was under the eave now, and the rain was filling it. Slow, steady, drop by patient drop. I turned to him. The rain was soft on the roof. The light had gone the color of honey. And my voice that had trembled at his counter, that had cracked alone in the dark, that had rung out steady in a room full of people who needed to hear it, was warm now, and certain, and entirely my own. "Someday," I said, "sounds just about right." He smiled, small, like sunrise when it first touches the ridge. The rain kept falling. The bucket kept filling. And somewhere behind me, in a nightstand drawer, in a cold cabin that wasn't so cold anymore, a gold ring rested in the dark, not forgotten, not abandoned, just finished with its work. The way a lantern can be set down gently once the sun comes up. I didn't need it to tell me who I was. Not anymore.